Welcome back to part 2 of our series on the French Revolution. In our first video, we looked at France before the Revolution and the establishment of the Estates General and the National Assembly. In this video, we'll look at the French Republic, the Reign of Terror, the Directory, and finally, Napoleon. So let's get started with the French Republic. France will attempt to create a whole new society. They create a new government, specifically a republic, where they write a new constitution and passed universal male suffrage, which basically just means that every male citizen can now vote. They also start by making a new calendar in which year one is 1792, which marks a new start for France. And this is the Thermidorian calendar. One of the first things this new republic needs to do is decide the fate of Louis XVI. He's tried to escape. He's actively kind of speaking against the movement of the revolution, and he won't acknowledge any of the new changes that the government has made. And so there's two groups at war kind of within this republic. One group wants to just kind of exile him, and then the other group says, no, we need to actually kill him. So they try and convict him of treason, conspiring against this new nation, and they officially behead him in the guillotine in 1793. And people were kind of excited about this new example of regicide. They saw him as kind of the originator of a lot of their problems. And his wife, Marie Antoinette, is killed in the same way later that year. She was also kind of seen as the originator of problems. Her luscious lifestyle and excessive overspending was seen, especially during those bread riot times, as being so extravagant and over the top that people really disliked her. This new government is going to heavily conscript or draft citizens into the army. It's known as the levée en masse. So this is done for two reasons. So first, they want to keep peace internally, but also they see the need to defend France as a whole. One of the things that's happening is that these other European monarchs, they do not like what they just did to Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, and they fear what's happening in France. And so they see this as an opportunity to kind of attack France to try to get traditional monarchs back in power. So they're going to spend a lot of time defending against these different European governments. Which brings us to the Reign of Terror. One of the groups that gains power during this period of the Republic are called the Jacobins. And the Jacobins are one of the more radical political groups during the French Revolution. They're extremely left wing and anti monarch. They are the ones that will call for all of these kind of major reforms that eventually lead to the Reign of Terror. And eventually, the Jacobins are going to take over this new government that was installed in the National Convention. It's called the Committee of Public Safety, and it's supposed to uphold the Republic during this transition period. But the Jacobins are going to take over through the leadership of Maximilien Robespierre, and that's when we see the Reign of Terror. Now, the Jacobins were able to do this because they had the allyship of the sans-culottes, which literally means without breeches or pants. It's made up of the lower classes of France. And so they had these people on their side that were making up most of the conscripted French army. And the sans-culottes want more of a direct democracy and a lot of those kind of more radical left-wing views. Now, the group that's kind of opposing the Jacobins during this time are the Girondins, and they are kind of known for wanting a more centralized government. They do want more representation in the government. They just don't really think that a direct democracy is the way to do that. But they are going to want to spread the revolution militarily throughout Europe. They're known as the War Party, and they are going to kind of directly conflict with the Jacobins. And a lot of the Jacobins and the leaders of the Reign of Terror are going to target these people, and many of their leaders will be killed or executed. One of the biggest advocates for the sans-culottes and their movement during this time is this guy named Jean-Paul Marat, and he's a radical journalist and politician during the French Revolution. He'll publish a lot of different articles and pamphlets in support of the revolution, and specifically, he's going to be really on board for all of the radical violence used during the French Revolution, kind of egging these people on, saying no, what you're doing is right. You should use violence to kind of create this new society that we're all looking for. And it's because of his kind of radical ideas that he's assassinated during the French Revolution. And this is the famous picture by Jacques Louis David that we looked at during the classicism kind of art movement that happens during this time. But this piece becomes major political propaganda. It rallies the people that supported the sans-culottes and the Jacobins into kind of furthering this narrative against the current state. Another important leader during the Reign of Terror is going to be this man, Georges Danton. So he initially is one of the leaders of the Committee of Public Safety along with Robespierre. And he has a little bit different take on the direction that France should go into. He wants to uphold the rights of property and he wants to end war as quickly as possible through negotiation and restoring order through a strong central government. And he kind of like eventually thinks that Robespierre is going too far, which of course he is. And he calls for an end to this terror. He's like, we don't need all of this destruction, all of this violence. We don't need to kill all of these people to accomplish our goals. And he and his followers are arrested by Robespierre and they are tried for anti revolutionary activity and they are killed via guillotine. Another influential person that was taken out during the Reign of Terror is Olympe de Gouges, who was a French playwright. You may remember her name because she's the one that responded to the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen with the Declaration of the Rights of Women, saying basically, don't leave women out. We are essential to this movement as well, and we deserve the same kind of rights and freedoms in education. But basically, upon learning that, you know, the National Assembly still intended to leave them out, she wrote this piece to kind of encourage them not to forget women. And eventually, she's also seen as someone who is in danger of stopping the progress, through the Reign of Terror. And she is killed by guillotine as well at the behest of Robespierre. So if you haven't caught on, all of this kind of goes back to this one man, Maximilien Robespierre. The Reign of Terror really begins after the execution of Louis XVI, and it's where they decide who the traitors are. The traitors and enemy of the revolution, they'll all be executed with the guillotine, considered the most egalitarian form of death. And it's estimated that 40,000 people were killed in this 1 year of the Reign of Terror. And here are some of the things that the government that was put in place during this time, the Committee of Public Safety, was attempting to get done through the Reign of Terror. They wanted the policies of the Jacobins. They wanted those very left centrist ideas put into place. They wanted fixed wages for people. They wanted fixed prices on goods. So, bread would only be this price always, no matter the supply or demand. And one thing they were looking to do was de-Christianization of society. Like they wanted to get rid of religion because they saw it as morally corrupt. Now, the Reign of Terror only lasts a year, but it leaves a major impact for France. But during this time period, there's plenty of people that oppose Robespierre. They're just, afraid to get killed if they speak up about it. But eventually, there's a solid group of kind of upper middle class, more moderate people that try to take Robespierre down, and they are successful. They're able to arrest him, and they accuse him of leading France into tyranny and dictatorship. And they actually execute him with the guillotine, which is kind of like, a good comeuppance. Which then finally leads us into France's next government, the Directory, and then eventually Napoleon. So after the death of Robespierre, those respectable middle class lawyers and professionals who kind of, got him out of power in the first place, they're going to try and take things back to the early ideals of the revolution. And this is known as the Thermidorian reaction. So they create a new constitution in 1795 and they set up a new legislative system. All of this is meant to kind of like equal things out, go back to the beginnings and kind of restart. And at the top of this system, to prevent another Robespierre, they elect 5 men to kind of lead France, and they call those people the Directory. The Directory will lead France for 4 years, but the French people are not so fond of the Directory. They're seen as corrupt, and they're seen as an ineffective government that it doesn't get much done. And in 1799, Napoleon Bonaparte, who has been a military leader in France for the last, several years, he ends the Directory in a coup d'état, which is a violent overthrow of the government by a small group of people. And so Napoleon, who around 30 years old now, will be the new military leader, really dictator of France for the next 15 years. So France goes through 10 years of, turmoil and struggle and fighting, all to end up with a military dictator. So, historians often question, like, is the French Revolution really successful? Does it bring about the changes that France wants? And that's kind of, up to you to decide. It does bring some reforms, and we'll look at those with Napoleon later on, but ultimately they still end up with not the democracy or constitutional, republic that they were hoping for. This concludes our topic of the French Revolution. Next time, we'll look at Napoleon and the Congress of Vienna and see how Napoleon shakes things up. Thanks for watching.